Have you ever found yourself caught in an unexpected moment that changes everything? For Evan, a casual dinner with his mum and her friend Claire takes a surprising turn when a simple compliment ignites a whirlwind of emotions. As the lines between friendship and something deeper start to blur, Evan is left questioning everything he thought he knew. What happens next is a journey of confusion, attraction, and the struggle to navigate uncharted territory. Stick around to see how it all unfolds. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more captivating stories. I had never really given it much thought before. I mean, I knew that my mum's friend Claire was around often, but she had always just been, well, my mum's friend. There was never anything particularly awkward between us, or anything that would make me reconsider. She was simply someone who showed up for dinner, or came over on those random Sunday afternoons for tea, nothing out of the ordinary. But that particular night, everything felt different. It all began so casually, as it usually does when you don't expect it. Mum had invited Claire over for dinner, like she did every couple of weeks. Claire was one of those women who always looked well put together. Maybe it was her style, or just the way she carried herself, but she never seemed out of place, no matter where she was. I remember the moment clearly. I was sitting at the dinner table, messing with my phone, pretending I wasn't starving. Mom and Claire were chatting about some mutual friends, and I wasn't really paying attention. I had tuned them out completely, until Claire's voice suddenly broke through the conversation with one comment that brought me back to reality. She looked straight at me and smiled. Her smile was a bit more than just polite, a little warmer. "You've really grown into a handsome man, Evan," she said. I swear I almost choked on my drink. I knew it wasn't meant as some bold, flirtatious remark. She was just being honest, I guess. But something about the way she said it made me feel strange. It wasn't just a passing comment. There was something in her eyes, a kind of look that made you question if she truly meant it. For the first time, I started noticing things I'd never paid attention to before. Claire was in her 40s, but she didn't look it. She had this way of looking at people that made you feel seen and understood. She always carried herself with an air of confidence that I admired, but I hadn't really thought much about it before until she said that. I shifted uncomfortably in my seat, unsure of how to react. Was I supposed to just smile and move on, or was I expected to acknowledge the odd tension in the air? Mum didn't seem to notice anything unusual. She laughed and kept talking about the party they'd gone to last year. But I couldn't shake the feeling. I kept glancing at Claire, trying not to make it obvious. But she kept looking at me, almost as if she was waiting for me to react. I wasn't sure if I should say something or just pretend it hadn't happened. Dinner ended like any other evening. We all said our goodbyes, and Claire gave me a hug that lasted just a little longer than usual. Her hand brushed against my arm in a way that felt different. Was I imagining it? Was it just me? Or was there something there? After Claire left, I walked back to my room, and I couldn't stop thinking about what had just happened. Did she really mean it? I kept asking myself. The compliment, the smile, the way she looked at me, it felt like it was more than just a friendly comment. But then again, maybe I was overthinking it. She was my mum's friend, for heaven's sake. That kind of thing doesn't happen, does it? I just couldn't get rid of the feeling. The entire evening kept replaying in my mind. I hadn't felt like this in a long time. It was confusing. I hadn't been used to feeling like someone was looking at me in a way that made me think. I'd been through a lot lately breaking up with my ex, and I hadn't really thought about anything beyond work and keeping to myself. But now, everything felt different. Claire had looked at me, and for the first time, I started to wonder if there was more to her than just being my mom's friend. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was all in my head. But that one line, "You've really grown into a handsome man, Evan," kept echoing in my mind, and I couldn't ignore it. The whole thing was unsettling, but at the same time, part of me didn't want it to be over. The next few days felt strange. It wasn't like I was obsessing over it, but I couldn't help but notice the little things. Claire had been coming over to our house more often than usual. She'd pop by for tea or just to catch up with Mom. At first, I didn't think much of it, but gradually, I started feeling like there was something more to it. She'd always been friendly, but now it felt like there was a different dynamic when she was around. I tried to brush it off. Maybe I was just overthinking it. After all, Claire was just a regular part of my mum's social circle. But there was something different in the air now. I would catch her looking at me a little longer than necessary, almost like she was studying me in some way. It wasn't uncomfortable exactly, but it was noticeable. One afternoon, I was sitting at my desk in my room, working on a graphic design project, really getting into the zone when I heard a knock on the door. Since Mum wasn't home, I assumed it was Claire. Sure enough, when I opened the door, there she was, standing with a smile. "Hey, Evan, got a minute?" she asked, holding up a coffee cup. "I made a little extra and thought you might like some." I felt a bit awkward, but I didn't want to be rude. "Sure, come in," I said, stepping aside. She walked in as though it was the most natural thing in the world. We sat on the couch in my room. She handed me the cup, and we talked about the usual stuff, how Mum was doing, how work was going. But now, there was an underlying tension. Every word she spoke felt a little heavier, as though there was more to it than just casual conversation. "So, how's life? Still keeping busy with all your projects?" she asked. Stirring her coffee casually, I replied, "Yeah, same old stuff," attempting to keep the mood light. However, as soon as the words left my mouth, I realized I wasn't entirely sure what I meant by them. I wasn't lying, but I had the feeling I wasn't being entirely open either, like there was more to me that I wasn't sharing. She leaned in slightly, locking eyes with me. "You know," she began softly, "I've always admired how ambitious you are. You've really grown into a handsome man." It wasn't the first time she had said something along those lines, but this time it felt different. My heart rate increased slightly, a mix of confusion and curiosity taking over. Was she just expressing friendly admiration, or was there something more to her words? I tried to stay calm, unsure of how to respond to a comment like that. I didn't want to make things awkward, but I also didn't want to send the wrong message. "Thanks," I said, trying to sound casual. "I guess I'm just figuring things out." She smiled and nodded, but then there was a pause, a quiet moment filled with an unspoken tension. "I know that feeling," she said, her voice softer now. "Sometimes it's nice to have someone to talk to, someone who understands. You're a good listener, Evan." I nodded, uncertain of how to react. I felt like I was caught in a situation that wasn't exactly uncomfortable, but definitely odd. We continued talking for a few more minutes, but the atmosphere between us had changed. When it was time for her to leave, she stood up and headed for the door. I followed her out to the hallway, and just before she left, she paused. "Thanks for the coffee, Evan. I'll see you soon," she said, giving me that same smile from dinner. But this time, there was something else in her gaze, a warmth that lingered just a bit too long. She left, and I stood there in the doorway, watching her walk down the stairs. For some reason, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. Was I reading too much into this? Or was there something more? Maybe it was nothing. But every time Clara looked at me, it felt like I was missing something important. I walked back into my room, sat down at my desk, and tried to focus. But no matter what I did, I kept replaying our conversation in my mind. Was it just a coincidence? I wondered. But deep down, I wasn't so sure anymore. The days after Clara's visit started blending together. It wasn't so much about what she did, but the way I started feeling whenever she was around. Every little thing about her, the way she spoke, her smile, the way she looked at me, seemed charged with something I didn't quite know how to handle. And the worst part was, it felt like she knew it. She had a way of making everything seem just a little too personal, a little too intimate. A week after that coffee conversation, she came by the house again. This time, Mum was out running errands, so it was just Clara and me. She was carrying a bag of groceries, which struck me as odd. "I thought I'd make dinner tonight," she said with a smile. "A little something for you and your mum." "Sure, that'd be great," I replied, though the idea of being alone with her still felt somewhat strange. But I couldn't refuse. We began preparing dinner together, mostly in silence. I chopped vegetables while she worked at the stove. Every now and then, she'd make a comment, like how she loved the smell of garlic, or how much I'd grown since the last time she'd seen me. I noticed her hands brushing against mine more than once, and each time, my heart skipped a beat. I tried to stay calm, but the tension in the air was palpable. "I've always enjoyed spending time with you, Evan," Clara said, stirring the pot. Her voice had a softness that made me feel like there was something more behind her words. I wasn't sure how to respond. "Yeah, me too," I said, keeping my tone casual. I didn't want to make it awkward, but I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep up the act. She glanced at me, a small smile playing at her lips. "You've become such a fine young man. Your mum's always telling me how proud she is of you," she added. She said it so casually, but I couldn't help but notice how her gaze lingered on me just a second too long. I turned my attention back to chopping the vegetables, trying to steer the conversation away from anything too personal, but I couldn't ignore how she kept moving closer, as though she wanted to close the distance between us. Her presence filled the room in a way that felt almost overwhelming, and I wasn't sure if it was intentional or not. As we ate dinner, the tension remained. Clara kept looking at me, and each time I felt myself growing more uncomfortable. I wasn't sure what she wanted from me. Was she just being friendly, or was there something more she was hinting at? After dinner, I decided to go for a walk to clear my head. I needed some space to think. Clara offered to join me, but I told her I just needed some time alone. "Of course," she said, standing up and brushing her hands off. "But if you ever need someone to talk to, Evan, I'm always here for you. You know that, right?" Her words took me by surprise. It wasn't the first time she had said something like that, but this time there was a weight to it, something beneath her words that carried a different tone, something I couldn't shake off. I stepped outside, my head a mess of tangled thoughts. What was going on? Was Claire simply being extra kind? Or was there something deeper at play? I kept insisting to myself that it was nothing, that I was just reading into things. But somewhere inside, I understood it wasn't that straightforward. I had to get to the bottom of it, but how? I wandered the neighborhood, letting my thoughts drift. I kept circling back to her, the way she looked at me, the way she spoke to me. Was it really just friendliness? Or was I blind to something more? And if there was something else, what was I supposed to make of it? When I got back, the house was quiet. Claire had left, and my mom had just returned home. Everything appeared back to normal, yet that sense of normalcy didn't give me the ease I thought it would. In fact, it made me feel even more off balance. The whole night went by in a haze. I couldn't stop thinking that something between Claire and me had shifted. I tried to convince myself I was being dramatic, that I was blowing things out of proportion. But I couldn't fully believe that anymore. The whole situation was becoming too much to push aside. At that point, the truth was staring me down. There was no more pretending. Claire's actions had become too apparent, too unsettling to write off as mere affection. It wasn't only the looks she gave me, or how often her hand brushed against mine. It was the way she treated me like I was the only person who mattered whenever we were in the same room. And that attention, it left me uneasy. A few days had passed since that dinner, and I was beginning to feel trapped in this strange reality. I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to hurt Claire's feelings. Yet at the same time, I couldn't keep faking that everything was okay, when it clearly wasn't. I had been steering clear of her the last couple of days. Mum had been tied up with work, and Claire hadn't dropped by much. I figured it was for the best. Less time around her meant fewer mixed signals for me to decipher. But then, almost as if the universe was mocking me, Claire came by again. It was late in the day, and I had just settled in to watch a game when the doorbell rang. I checked my phone. There was a message from Mum saying she'd be home late. I opened the door, and there Claire was, flashing that all too familiar smile. "Hey, Evan," she said brightly. "I was in the area and thought I'd swing by. I brought some wine for your mom, but I figured we could chat for a minute first." I paused, unsure. I didn't want to come off rude, but I wasn't confident I could handle another one of those conversations where the line between friendship and something else kept getting murky. "Sure, come in," I replied, trying to sound neutral. As she stepped inside, I noticed how little space she left between us. Every movement she made felt purposeful. And the worst part, it was starting to affect me. I wasn't just nervous anymore. I was beginning to feel drawn in. I hated that reaction. But something about her, the way she smiled, the way she spoke, it pulled at me. And I couldn't dismiss it. She sat on the couch, crossing her legs, in a way that made the room feel smaller, more personal. "So," she said, her tone casual, but her posture anything but. "How's everything? You holding up okay with all that's been going on?" I hesitated. Her question didn't feel entirely innocent. It was as if she wanted me to open up in a way that went beyond simple concern. "Yeah, just the usual," I said, trying to brush it off. She didn't seem to take the cue. Instead, she inched closer. "You know, Evan, I've always been so proud of you. You've turned into such an amazing young man." Her eyes softened. Her voice lowered slightly. And for a moment, it felt like her words were reaching right into me. I shifted uncomfortably, unsure how to respond. I wanted to say something, to tell her this wasn't okay, that what she was doing was throwing me off balance, but the words wouldn't form. I just sat there, unable to move, listening. "You're not like other guys your age," she continued. There's something different about you. You have this calmness, this maturity that's rare. My pulse quickened, but I kept my face composed. Thanks, I guess, I muttered, attempting to keep things light, but Claire wasn't letting up. She leaned in, her face just inches from mine. Then came a pause, an odd, lingering silence. For the first time, the full weight of the moment pressed down on me. She was waiting for something, maybe a reaction. I didn't know, but I could feel her watching me, and it felt like time stopped. The room suddenly seemed tighter, like the walls were closing in. Then, Claire spoke again, her voice hushed, barely above a whisper. "Evan," she said gently, "there's something I need to say." My chest tightened. I wasn't sure I was prepared for whatever was coming next, but it felt too late to walk away now. Deep down, I sensed it we were on the edge of a line that once crossed couldn't be undone. She paused again, taking a slow breath. "I've been thinking about this for a while. About you. And I can't hold it in anymore. I know I've been different, but I couldn't control it. I froze. I didn't know what I had been waiting to hear from her, but it definitely wasn't this. She was finally owning up to it, admitting that what had been happening between us wasn't just friendly interaction or harmless chat. Claire's gaze locked onto mine, and the seriousness in her expression was impossible to miss. "I can't change how I feel. I've tried, but I just can't," she said. I was speechless, my thoughts spinning wildly as I tried to absorb what she had just told me. Everything felt like chaos, absolute chaos. I needed to stop this immediately, before things spiraled even more out of control. But just as I was about to say something, the front door opened, and my mum stepped inside. Claire stood up right away, like nothing unusual had occurred. "Hi, Claire, what's going on?" Mum asked, clearly not sensing the heaviness that had filled the room just moments ago. Claire quickly composed herself and smiled. "Oh, nothing really. Just dropping by to check on Evan. I should get going now." After Claire walked out, a sense of dread settled over me. I had a gut feeling that everything was about to unravel even more. I needed to find a way out of this mess before it got worse. The days after Claire's confession were suffocating. I ignored her calls and messages and avoided any place where we might accidentally meet. I had no clue how to move forward. I was conflicted. Part of me could empathize with her emotions, but another part knew that what she did wasn't right. I had to put a stop to this before it became even more complicated. Then one evening, I got a message from her. It simply said, "Evan, can we talk?" I wasn't sure what to feel. My heart pounded as I stared at my phone, the weight of the situation sinking in. But deep down, I understood that the conversation had to happen. I couldn't keep avoiding it. Later that day, I drove to our usual coffee shop. As I walked in, I spotted Claire seated at a corner table. She looked uneasy, her fingers nervously tapping, her face pale. When she noticed me, she stood up quickly. "Evan," she said, her voice trembling. "I've been thinking about all of it. I'm really sorry for crossing the line. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable, and I get it if you're upset. I'm not sure why it happened. I just let my emotions take over." I gave a small nod, doing my best to stay composed. "Claire, you've been a close friend to me and to my mom for a long time. But what took place wasn't right. A line was crossed that shouldn't have been. I know you didn't intend to hurt anyone, but we both need to accept that this can't keep happening." She looked away and bit her lip, clearly feeling ashamed. I get it, Evan. I really do. But I don't want to lose you as a friend. I don't want this to ruin what we have. You matter to me. I took a deep breath, knowing I had to be direct but kind. Look, Claire, I care about you too. But we can't let this go on any further. I can't just ignore what happened. But at the same time, I don't want to lose our friendship either. We need to draw a clear line. And that's what I'm asking for. If we can both stick to that, maybe there's a way we can move forward. She nodded slowly, eyes shining with appreciation. I don't want things to be weird between us. I promise, if we can just be friends, I'll stick to that. No more mixed signals, no more stepping over boundaries, just friendship. We sat in silence for a few moments before I replied again. I think we both need a bit of space. Maybe taking a break will help us reset everything. Claire gave a small, relieved smile. You're right. It's for the best. We talked for a little while longer, and by the time our conversation ended, it felt like a heavy load had been lifted off my shoulders. The tension that had been hanging in the air for days was finally gone. We both grasped the seriousness of the situation, but more importantly, we had come to an agreement on how to handle things going forward. That night, on the drive home, I felt like something in my life had finally settled. I had drawn a clear line, but I also left space for healing. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't sad either. I just wanted everything to go back to the way it used to be. When I walked in, Mom asked how things had gone with Claire. I took a moment to collect myself before answering. It went well, I said with a small smile. We talked through it. Everything's okay now. She looked relieved. I'm really glad to hear that. You've both been through a lot recently. I nodded. But deep inside, I felt even more at ease than I let on. It wasn't just fine, it was resolved. Claire and I were going to be all right, and things could return to normal. It hadn't been easy, but it was the right thing to do. As the weeks passed, the awkwardness between Claire and me began to fade. And little by little, we started spending time together again. This time, however, there was a different kind of understanding between us, a mutual respect for limits that hadn't existed before. I never erased what had occurred from my memory, but it didn't define who we became. In the end, Claire and I stayed close. Our bond actually deepened because we confronted everything honestly instead of ignoring it or pretending it didn't affect us. Though things were uncertain for a while, we both emerged from the experience with a clearer view of who we were and what we hoped to gain from each other. That summer taught me that having tough talks and setting clear boundaries are sometimes the best ways to protect the relationships that mean the most. In our case, our friendship lasted because we both chose to face reality and accept it. 7 months had gone by since that emotional talk with Claire. The strain between us had eased over time, and I had come to terms with the choice we made, finding a sense of calm in the aftermath. But life has a strange habit of dragging you back into chapters you thought were closed. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon, and I found myself wandering through a nearby park, hoping to clear my head after a demanding week. The weather couldn't have been better. The sky was bright, the sun was out, and for the first time in what felt like ages, I felt truly relaxed. As I rounded a curve near the lake, I spotted her Claire. She was seated on a bench, peacefully watching the ducks on the water. She hadn't noticed me yet, and for a second, I thought about just walking by without saying a word. It had been months since we'd last crossed paths. Things between us had settled, but that was all in the past, right? Still, she looked so at ease, so calm, and something about that made it impossible for me to just walk away. I approached slowly, not wanting to catch her off guard. "Claire," I said, unsure of myself. She turned toward me, her face lighting up with recognition. "Evan," she responded, rising to her feet quickly. "I didn't think I'd see you here." I gave a small smile, feeling both anxious and strangely comforted. "Same here," I admitted. "It's been a long time." She gave a quiet nod, her eyes soft. "Yeah, it really has." We stood there for a few moments, the unease from all those months ago slowly melting away. I could tell from her expression that she was just as unsure of what to say as I was. But the nervousness now had a lighter feel to it. "How have you been?" she asked, her tone warm. "Pretty good," I answered, slipping my hands into my pockets. "You know, work, life, same routine. What about you?" "I'm good too," she said with a quiet laugh. "Just figuring things out." We both went quiet again, standing there and simply being present. There was no stress, no discomfort, just two people who had been through something meaningful and were still here, facing each other after all this time. I could sense the familiar connection between us hadn't vanished. It had only changed. This time, though, we were in a healthier place. Breaking the silence, I asked, "Would you want to grab a coffee or something?" Her face lit up with a smile. "I'd like that." We strolled over to a nearby cafe, and the conversation flowed effortlessly, just like it used to. The tension was gone. The doubts had faded. It felt like the 7 months apart had wiped away the awkwardness, leaving behind the comfort we'd once shared. As we sat down with our drinks, I noticed something new about her. She seemed more grounded, more secure in herself, and yet the same sparkle in her eyes that had first caught my attention was still there. "I've been thinking a lot about everything," I said carefully, unsure of how to begin. "About what happened between us, and I think I might have been too quick to give up on it all. Maybe we both were." She didn't reply right away. Instead, she just looked at me, her gaze searching mine. "What are you trying to say, Evan?" she asked softly. I took a deep breath, the weight of the moment pressing down. "I'm saying, I think I'm ready to give this another shot, but this time, just between us. No labels, no expectations, just us." Her features softened and a slight smile formed on her lips. "You mean, keep it just between the two of us?" "Exactly," I confirmed, nodding. "Let's do what feels right for us, without thinking about anyone else's opinions." Her smile widened as she reached across the table, placing her hand gently over mine. "That sounds perfect to me." In that instant, everything fell into place. It was no longer about getting approval or living up to outside standards. It was about the connection we'd always had, the one that never really disappeared. It was simply about us. Over the following months, we kept things to ourselves. We saw each other when we could share dinners, went on walks, had movie nights. Nothing over the top, but exactly what we both wanted. There was no urge to define it or shape it into something specific. We were just two people enjoying each other's company, living in the now. We didn't share it with anyone. It remained our little secret. We were content, and that was enough. No drama, no pressure. Just the two of us, together and in those quiet times. With no one else around, everything felt right.